A frantic hammering echoes through the night. A woman stares out her window, eyes wide with terror, as a squad car pulls into the cul-de-sac, its red and blue lights flashing against the manicured lawns. A voice from the shadows whispers, "You think they can't do this? You're wrong. They'll call the cops over anything." Part 1. The first shot. The air hung thick and humid, a wet blanket clinging to every surface in the upscale community of Serenity Heights. It was the kind of heat that made you feel like you were swimming through syrup, and it did nothing to cool the simmering tension between the two houses on the corner of Maple Drive. For months, the animosity between the Miller family and their next-door neighbors, the HOA president Karen Albright and her husband Ken, had been a low, persistent hum, like a distant wasp nest you were trying to ignore. But today, the hum had found its target, a vibrant, 6-foot-tall sunflower, a single act of defiance against the sterile. Uniform perfection, Karen demanded. Liam Miller knelt in the parched earth, his hands caked with dirt, his brow slick with sweat. He looked at the sunflower, a proud, yellow sentinel that had grown from a seed his daughter Maya had planted. It was a beacon of wild, untamed life in a sea of meticulously trimmed lawns and carefully manicured bushes. The seed was an afterthought, a random gift from a school science fair. He'd shown Maya how to poke it into the ground, a little lesson in patience and growth. He never imagined it would become a weapon. "It's just a flower, honey," his wife Sarah had said that morning, peering out from the kitchen window. She had a worried frown that seemed to have become a permanent fixture on her face since they moved into the neighborhood. "It's not hurting anyone." "It's not about the flower," Liam had replied, standing up to stretch his aching back. "It's about the principle." The HOA had sent them 3 separate violation notices. The first was a polite, pre-printed form. The second was a sterner email with bold text. The third was a certified letter, a small white envelope filled with bureaucratic malice, threatening fines and legal action if the unapproved plant species was not removed. Just then, the screen door of the Albrights' house slammed shut. Karen emerged, a woman who seemed to have been born with a clipboard in her hand. Her perfect blonde bob was unmoved by the humidity, her crisp white shorts pristine. She marched across her lawn, her steps deliberate and firm, as if she were inspecting a military barracks. "Liam," she began, her voice a sharp-edged hum. "We've been more than patient. You received the final notice. The sunflower has to go. It violates Article 7, Section 3B of the Community Covenants." "Karen, it's a sunflower," Liam said, his voice a low, tired rumble. He wiped a hand across his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt. "My daughter planted it. She loves it. It's not a blighted property. It's not a nuisance. It's a beautiful, natural thing." Article 7. Section 3B explicitly prohibits any plant species taller than 4 feet in the front yard without prior architectural committee approval, she recited, her eyes unblinking, fixed not on Liam's face, but on the sunflower. "And it's an annual, which is also a violation. We've gone over this. We've gone over it, and it's insane," Sarah interjected, stepping onto the porch. Her hands were on her hips, a posture of weary defense. "You're seriously going to fine us for a flower?" "It's not about the fine, Sarah," Karen said, turning her icy gaze on her. "It's about maintaining the integrity and property values of this community. When we allow one person to flaunt the rules, the whole system collapses. What's next? A chicken coop? An above-ground pool?" Ken Albright, a man whose entire personality seemed to be a silent extension of his wife's, stood on their porch, arms crossed, a smug, satisfied smirk on his face. He said nothing, but his presence was a heavy weight. "You're just looking for a fight, Karen," Liam said, his voice rising, his patience fraying. "We've tried to be good neighbors. We've tried to compromise, but you just won't stop. The rules are the rules, Liam. And you agreed to them when you signed the papers," Karen stated, pulling a cell phone from her pocket. The glint of the screen in the sun felt like the first flash of a knife. "I'm making the call. The bylaw is clear. Unauthorized property modification. The police will issue a citation for failure to comply with community regulations. This is no longer a community matter." A stunned silence fell. Liam's mouth opened, then closed. Sarah's face drained of color. The audacity of the threat was breathtaking. To involve law enforcement over a flower. It was a line that hadn't been crossed before. "You can't be serious," Liam said, his voice a disbelieving whisper. "You're going to call the cops on a family with a kid because of a sunflower?" "I'm serious about the bylaws," Karen said, her thumb hovering over the dial pad. "This is your last chance. Take it down, now!" The air crackled with the silent standoff. The sun beat down, turning the asphalt to a shimmering mirage. Liam looked at the sunflower, a symbol of his daughter's innocence and his own quiet rebellion. He looked at Karen, her face a mask of self-righteous fury. And then he made a decision. He took a deep, shuddering breath and walked to the base of the flower. "Liam, don't," Sarah pleaded, her voice a tight, strangled sound. Liam didn't answer. He reached down and wrapped his hands around the thick, green stalk. He felt the life within it, the sturdy stem that had weathered weeks of sun and wind. He felt the weight of Karen's eyes on him, the silent triumph of Ken. He felt the crushing realization that he had underestimated the depths of their small-town tyranny. He pulled. The roots held firm. He pulled again. Just as the stalk began to give, a small, innocent voice rang out from the front door. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Maya, her small face framed by a halo of golden hair, stood in the doorway, her teddy bear clutched in her hand. She had just woken up from her nap. She looked at her father, at the stalk in his hand, and her eyes, wide and trusting, flickered to the sunflower. The unspoken horror in her expression was a punch to the gut. She saw not just a father about to rip a flower from the ground, but a father about to destroy something they had built together, something that was theirs. The sight of his daughter's face, her confusion and hurt, was a breaking point. A red haze of fury and protective rage flooded Liam's vision. He let go of the sunflower. He straightened up and turned to face Karen. "Fine," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Do it, call them." "You want to make this a police matter? Let's make it a police matter." Karen's lips thinned into a satisfied line. She dialed the number, her gaze never leaving Liam's. He watched her, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. The call connected. She began to speak, her voice a syrupy calm, reciting her complaint to the dispatcher. "Yes, an unauthorized structure, a violation of community bylaws. They're refusing to comply. A public nuisance. I'd like to report a disturbance." The last words hung in the air, a final, definitive accusation. A disturbance. As if the act of planting a flower was a crime, and they were criminals. A police siren wailed in the distance. The sound grew louder, closer, echoing through the peaceful streets of Serenity Heights. It wasn't the first time an HOA dispute had turned ugly, but it was the first time one had escalated to this. The arrival of law enforcement was no longer a threat, but a reality. The blue lights of the cruiser flashed, a silent, surreal intrusion, illuminating the two families. The angry man, the defiant flower, and the smug couple who had just called the cops over this. The red and blue strobes of the cruiser painted the manicured lawn in jarring flashes, turning the perfectly trimmed bushes into jagged spectral shapes. The wail of the siren cut out, leaving a thick, pulsing silence that was somehow louder than the noise itself. Two officers, a burly, world-weary man named Daniels, with a face that looked like it had seen every kind of neighborhood dispute, and a younger, more alert officer, Chen, stepped out of the squad car. They moved with a practiced, deliberate slowness, their eyes scanning the scene, taking in the defiant sunflower, the fuming man, the distraught woman, and the smug couple across the street. Karen didn't wait for them to approach. She practically jogged onto her lawn, her movements sharp and confident. "Officers, thank you so much for coming. This is a clear violation of the Serenity Heights Homeowners Association bylaws, Article 7, Section 3B specifically. They've been issued multiple warnings and have refused to comply. It's a public nuisance." Daniels gave a slow nod, his gaze fixed on Karen's clipboard. "Ma'am, let's take a breath. What exactly is the violation?" Karen pointed a trembling finger at the sunflower. "That it's an unapproved plant species. It's taller than 4 feet and it's an annual. We have covenants for a reason." Daniel's eyes, which had been serious and professional, flickered with a brief, almost imperceptible moment of disbelief. He looked from Karen to the clipboard and finally to the sunflower. He let out a soft, guttural sigh, a sound that conveyed a deep and profound exhaustion. "This is about a flower?" "It's about the rules, officer," Ken Albright said, his voice a low, self-satisfied drone. "The Millers are in breach of contract. We all signed the same document. We all live by the same rules." Liam, his face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief, took a step forward. No, it's not about the rules." "It's about her," he said, jabbing a finger in Karen's direction. "She has a problem with us. She's been harassing us for months. For a bird feeder? For the color of our welcome mat? And now this. A 6-foot sunflower that my daughter planted. Are you seriously going to issue a citation over a flower?" Officer Chen, the younger of the two, looked back at his partner, a question in his eyes. This was exactly the kind of ridiculous call that made the job feel like a surreal performance. Daniels held up a hand. "Let's just get the facts. Mr. Miller, you planted this?" "My daughter and I did," Liam said, his voice raw. "It's a sunflower. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," Karen interjected, her voice rising in pitch, "is the property value. It's the aesthetic of the community. What if everyone started planting whatever they wanted? This is a planned community, officer. We have standards. It's not an unkempt yard. It's not an eyesore. It's just a flower," Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking. "Our daughter loves it. Can't you just talk to them?" "This is insane." Officer Daniels sighed again, the sound of a man carrying the weight of 1,000 petty grievances. He walked over to the sunflower, running a hand over its vibrant yellow petals. He seemed to be thinking. The flashing lights bounced off the glass of their living room window, and Liam caught a glimpse of Maya's small face pressed against the glass, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "That was the final blow." "Look," Daniels said, turning back to face everyone, his voice low and firm. "We get a lot of these. Show disputes. Neighbor against neighbor. It's never pretty. Here's the deal. A formal complaint has been filed. By law, we have to document it. We're not here to arbitrate your HOA rules, but if there's a claim of a nuisance and a refusal to comply, we can issue a non-criminal citation. It's a formality. It's not an arrest." "What does that even mean?" Liam asked, his throat tight with rising panic. "It means you'll get a piece of paper telling you to fix the violation," Daniels explained, his face a mask of weary neutrality. "The HOA can then take you to small claims court for the fine. This isn't a police matter, not really. It's a civil one, but we have to document the report and the non-compliance." "That's our job," Karen smiled, a tight, cold expression of triumph. It wasn't an outright victory, but it was a clear validation of her power. Ken stood taller, the smugness on his face now fully realized. They had successfully used the arm of the law to enforce their will. "So you're doing it? You're giving us a ticket because of a flower?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with a desperate, heartbreaking incredulity. Daniels looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, a flicker of genuine sympathy crossed his face. "We're documenting the complaint, ma'am. That's all. It's a civil matter now." He took a small notepad from his pocket, scribbling down the details. He walked over to Liam and handed him a slip of paper. "This is just a warning officially. You have 72 hours to comply." Liam stared at the paper in his hand, a small, innocent-looking slip that felt heavier than a rock. It was a formal police document with their names on it, a case number, and a description of the offense. The offense was a flower. "Thank you. Officers," Karen said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We appreciate your professionalism." Daniels and Chen nodded, their expressions unreadable, and walked back to the cruiser. The engine rumbled to life, the blue lights strobed a final time, and then they were gone, leaving the cul-de-sac in a sudden, profound darkness. The silence that followed was suffocating. Karen and Ken stood on their lawn, a portrait of victorious righteousness. Liam and Sarah stood on theirs, a portrait of stunned defeat. The small slip of paper in Liam's hand felt like a formal declaration of war. He looked at it, then at the proud, yellow head of the sunflower, and finally at his daughter's tear-stained face in the window. The fear in her eyes was a physical blow. They hadn't just been given a warning. They had been exposed, humiliated, and formally branded as rule breakers. A new kind of heat, colder and more potent than the humid air, began to burn inside Liam. He crumpled the paper in his fist, the sound a small, vicious crunch. This wasn't just about a flower anymore. This was about a family, a home, and the malicious power of people who were willing to call the cops on a child over a plant. He looked at Karen, and the smile on her face twisted his stomach into a hard knot. He didn't say a word. He walked into his house, not to console his daughter, not to comfort his wife, but to the small office he kept in the corner of the living room. Sarah followed him, her face full of dread. He sat down at the computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He wasn't looking for a compromise. He wasn't looking for a truce. He was looking for a lawyer, for the bylaws of the Serenity Heights HOA, and for a way to make Karen Albright pay for what she had just done. This was no longer a dispute. It was a fight for their dignity, and he had just officially declared his first move. The war had begun. The blue screen of the laptop cast an eerie glow over Liam's face, illuminating the hard, determined lines of his jaw. The crumpled police warning lay beside the keyboard, a monument to the absurdity of the situation. He felt a cold calm settle over him, the kind that comes after the heat of rage has burned itself out, leaving behind a sharp, clear purpose. He wasn't just mad anymore. He was focused. Sarah stood in the doorway, her hands clasped tightly together. "What are you doing, Liam? Please don't. Don't make this worse." He didn't look up from the screen. Worse? What could be worse than what they've already done? They used the police against us, Sarah, over a flower. They've made us look like criminals in front of our neighbors, in front of our own daughter. They've crossed the line. But a lawsuit? That's a whole different level. It'll cost thousands of dollars. "We don't have that kind of money just lying around for this," she said, her voice trembling. "We can't afford not to," he countered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He was deep in the legal weeds now, researching HOA litigation, looking for loopholes in the covenants, searching for lawyers who specialized in these kinds of disputes. This isn't just about the money now. It's about a principle. It's about letting them know they can't get away with this. They're bullies, and the only thing bullies understand is a force stronger than their own. He found a law firm's website, one that advertised specifically in HOA conflicts. He scrolled through a list of common legal actions: failure to enforce rules consistently, arbitrary and capricious decision-making, harassment. He paused on the last one, harassment. The word felt right. A perfect description of Karen's relentless campaign. He filled out an online consultation form, his words a furious spill of frustration. "Received a police citation over a sunflower my daughter planted. HOA president calling it a public nuisance. This is a clear case of selective and malicious enforcement. Seeking legal action against the HOA and its president for harassment and abuse of power." He hit send. The moment the confirmation page appeared, a small measure of satisfaction, cold and hard as a stone, settled in his chest. Did you just do that?" Sarah asked, her voice a mix of awe and terror. "Yes," he said, finally looking at her. His eyes were no longer wild with anger, but held a chilling, resolute glint. "And that's just the beginning. I'm going to dig into every single bylaw. I'm going to find every violation she's ever overlooked for her friends, every rule she's bent for herself. I'm going to use their own weapon against them. This is not just a warning for them. This is a promise." Across the street, in the sterile perfection of the Albrights' home, Karen was pouring a glass of iced tea, her triumph still fresh and sweet on her tongue. The police had come and gone. The Millers had been officially warned. Ken sat in his armchair, a knowing smirk on his face as he scrolled through his phone. "See, Ken? I told you. All it takes is following the process," Karen said, taking a long, satisfied sip of her tea. "They'll learn. They'll take that thing down by the end of the week, I guarantee it. We've set a precedent. No one messes with the bylaws and gets away with it." Just then, her phone buzzed with an incoming email. It was a notification from the HOA's official website. A new post had just been made on the community forum. The title of the post, which was visible on the notification, made her tea glass pause mid-air. Subject: regarding the recent police visit to 123 Maple Drive, posted by Liam Miller. A knot of ice formed in her stomach. A public post? He was taking this public? She swiped the notification to open the full message. The post was short and to the point. It was a formal complaint, addressed not just to the board, but to the entire community. It detailed the timeline of events, from the first warning notice to the police citation. He attached a scanned copy of the warning, a clear image of a police document listing the unapproved plant species as the violation. The post ended with a simple, chilling sentence. "I believe this is a gross overreach of power and a direct act of harassment. I am now seeking legal counsel to challenge the HOA board's authority on this matter. I am prepared to take this as far as it needs to go." Karen stared at the screen, her perfect veneer of control cracking. The sip of tea she had just taken tasted like ash. This was not the quick, decisive victory she had imagined. This wasn't about a flower anymore. The police citation, a tool she had used to intimidate her neighbor, was now a public spectacle, and the fight had just moved to a much bigger, more dangerous stage. The war had just begun, and Liam Miller, the man she had dismissed as a simple troublemaker, had just fired the first shot. The community forum post ignited a firestorm. Notifications flooded Karen's inbox, each one a fresh spark on a pile of kindling she had so carefully, so maliciously laid. The replies came in fast and furious, a microcosm of the entire community's simmering tensions. Some were in lockstep with her, parroting her talking points about property values and the sanctity of the covenants. Others were more hesitant, questioning the severity of the action. But a surprising number of people were openly hostile, calling her a tyrant and a power-hungry bully. A police citation? For a sunflower? That's unconscionable, Karen. This is exactly why people hate HOAs. We bought into this neighborhood for a community, not a Gestapo. This is a disgrace. The Millers have always been wonderful neighbors. It seems like you have a personal vendetta. Karen's face, a mask of righteous indignation moments before, contorted into a furious scowl. She scrolled through the comments, her fingers swiping with a vicious urgency. This was not the obedient, compliant community she had so carefully cultivated. This was a rebellion. Her authority, once absolute, was now under public attack. "They're taking his side," she muttered, her voice a low, venomous hiss. Ken, who had been watching the drama unfold on his own phone, looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. The smugness from before was gone, replaced by a nervous energy. "Karen, maybe you should take it down?" he suggested, gesturing to the forum. "Or at least write a professional reply. This looks bad. Take it down? After everything he said?" "No!" she snapped. "I'll respond. And I'll put him in his place. He's trying to turn everyone against me. Against the board. I am the board." Meanwhile, across the street, the Miller family home had become a sanctuary of quiet resolution. The initial shock and humiliation had given way to a shared purpose. Sarah, who had been so terrified of making things worse, was now Liam's most fervent ally. The community forum was her validation. "Look at this, Liam," she said, holding up her phone, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and triumph. "People are supporting us. They're on our side." Liam, who was now poring over a printed copy of the HOA bylaws, barely looked up. "They're on our side now, but they'll get scared. These people hate confrontation. As soon as the legal bills start flying, they'll scatter. This isn't about public opinion, Sarah. This is about legal leverage." He ran a finger down a dense column of text. He wasn't just looking at the rules. He was looking for how they had been broken. He found a section on board elections, another on financial audits, and yet another on architectural reviews. He knew Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the bylaws, had a weak spot. She was a hypocrite. The Albrights had built a new sunroom 2 years ago. Liam distinctly remembered the project going up in record time with no public consultation. He picked up his phone and began typing a new post. This one was even more direct, a surgical strike aimed at the very heart of Karen's power. Subject: a question of consistency and oversight, posted by Liam Miller. To the Serenity Heights Board of Directors. I've had some questions about the recent enforcement of our bylaws. While I was cited for a sunflower, I've been reviewing the Architectural Committee's approval process. Can you please clarify the approval process for major structural additions? Specifically, was there a public hearing and a formal vote for the sunroom addition at 125 Maple Drive? Was the construction in full compliance with the original approved plans? I believe all residents deserve to know that the rules are being applied fairly and consistently. He hit post, and the message went out into the digital town square. He knew what this would do. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a demand for transparency. It directly challenged Karen's authority and pointed to a potential violation of her own, a much larger, more expensive one. It was no longer about a flower. It was about her power, her property, and her hypocrisy. Across the street, Karen was still crafting her fiery response to the first post when a new notification popped up. She read the subject line and her face went white. Her hands, which had been poised to type a scathing rebuttal, froze. She had never received official approval for the final design of the sunroom. She had used her position to fast-track the project, and now he had found the paper trail. Liam wasn't just fighting her. He was exposing her. He had found the crack in her perfect facade, and he was ready to pry it open. Her triumphant victory was turning into a public relations disaster, and the seeds of doubt were already taking root. The community was no longer a stage for her to perform on. It was a battleground, and Liam had just struck a devastating blow. Part 5. The Unseen Battle. Karen's hand shook as she reread Liam's latest post. The carefully constructed image of her perfect life, the one she had spent years building and protecting, was now under assault. Her private hypocrisy was now a public spectacle. The sunroom, a symbol of her ambition, was now a potential liability. "He's bluffing," Ken said, but the bravado in his voice was thin. He knew as well as she did that the architectural review for the sunroom had been a rushed affair. They had leveraged her position as board president to get it through without a proper public vote. It was a favor, a handshake deal with a friendly board member who had since moved away. The paperwork was likely buried or worse, never properly filed. "He's not bluffing. He's methodical," Karen corrected, her mind racing. "He's digging. He's looking for cracks in my armor, and he just found one." She sat down heavily, her mind a whirlwind of frantic thoughts. She had to shut this down. The sunroom was a major financial investment. The HOA could force them to tear it down, or at the very least, levy a massive fine, all because of a stupid sunflower. She went back to the forum, her fingers trembling over the keyboard. She couldn't admit to the impropriety, but she also couldn't ignore the question. It would make her look guilty. She crafted a response designed to be both vague and authoritative, a legalistic smokescreen. Subject: a question of consistency and oversight. Posted by Karen Albright, HOA President. All architectural modifications within Serenity Heights are subject to a formal review process as outlined in the covenants. The Albright Sunroom addition received the necessary approvals at the time of construction. Any insinuations of impropriety are unfounded and amount to baseless attacks on the board's integrity. This forum is not the proper venue for such a discussion. All further inquiries regarding past or present architectural reviews should be made in writing to the board's official email address. Let's remember the purpose of this forum: to foster a positive and productive community environment. The message was a clear deflection. It was the digital equivalent of a slammed door, but it did nothing to assuage the growing tension. In fact, it only seemed to fuel the flames of suspicion. Across the street, Liam read the response with a grim satisfaction. "She's rattled," he told Sarah, pointing at the screen. "That's not an answer, it's an evasion." "She's hiding something, so what's next?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with a newfound courage. "Another post?" "No," Liam said, shaking his head. "We're done with the public forum for now. She just gave me her next move, a written inquiry." He pulled out his laptop and began typing an email, an official document addressed to the HOA board. It was meticulously crafted, citing specific sections of the bylaws and demanding a copy of the Architectural Committee's approval for the Albright sunroom, a record of the public hearing and the final signed plans. He knew the board was nothing but a rubber stamp for Karen. He knew the documents didn't exist in the formal way they should. This was a trap. He hit send and leaned back in his chair, a cold, hard resolve in his eyes. He wasn't just fighting for his flower anymore. He was fighting for the integrity of their home, their family, and their place in this neighborhood. Unseen to them, a different kind of battle was beginning to take shape. While Liam and Karen were locked in their digital war, word of the police visit and the subsequent community drama was spreading through the neighborhood, not just online, but in whispered conversations over backyard fences and at the local coffee shop. Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind, elderly woman who lived 2 doors down, brought a fresh-baked apple pie to the Millers' front porch. "I just wanted you to know," she said quietly, her eyes full of concern, "that not everyone agrees with the way the HOA is acting. We love that sunflower. It brings a little bit of joy to the street." Across the cul-de-sac, in a sun-drenched kitchen, a young father named Mark was talking to his wife. "He's right, you know," he said, scrolling through the forum. "We never got a say in their sunroom. The rules should apply to everyone. I was thinking of putting in a fire pit, but now, I don't know." The real conflict wasn't just in the legal documents or on the community forum. It was in the minds of every resident, forcing them to choose a side. Karen and Liam were the generals, but the neighborhood was the army, and their loyalty was now a prize to be won. The sunflower, once a simple symbol of a child's innocence, was now the flag of a silent rebellion. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the street, a final, chilling email notification buzzed on Liam's phone. It wasn't from a lawyer or a neighbor. It was from the HOA's legal counsel. The subject line was stark and unambiguous. Subject, cease and desist order to Mr. Liam Miller. Your recent communications constitute a pattern of harassment and defamation against the Serenity Heights HOA Board of Directors and its president. You are hereby ordered to immediately cease all legal threats, public postings, and inquiries. Failure to comply will result in further legal action against you. It was a direct order, a legal hammer dropping. Karen, not content with just a verbal skirmish, had used the HOA's financial power to hire an outside law firm. They weren't just fighting her anymore. They were fighting the entire corporate entity of the HOA. The real war had truly begun.